Welcome to the last lesson in this course on writing functions, which we want to do if a piece of code is to be run several times. Now, didn't we just learn for loops that do that? Well, yes, and they work well for side effects like graphics, but for computing stuff, they're A, slow, and B, the code is not very elegant. So we're going to use functions, and then we can even call those in custom loops. Those functions can then also get unit tests, so especially if your stuff gets more complex, that will track if the changes you make in a function change the result accidentally. So here is one, analyze clim column. Usually it's a good idea to use verbs for your function name. It is created as a regular object with the assignment operator, and then it becomes a function with one parameter in this case, or argument, cn for column name. We have the curly brackets again with the body of the function, and the indentation is just to make it look nice for us. R doesn't care about that. Inside this function, the cn is used to select a column from clim, put that in values, create a histogram of those values with a couple of things, compute the maximum, and return that output. Return finishes a function. Any code after return will not be run, and so this is very handy if you want to conditionally return things, but that would be a bit beyond the scope of this course. Values and output are local objects, or temporary, within the execution of this function, and so they're not available outside of the function call. You can, within a function, access clim as a global object. Now, if you want this function to be more flexible and not just work for clim, you could have df and cn or something like that for data frame and column name, and then instead of clim, use df and not hard code the object name. Now, once you've written a function like this, you can call it like any other function, analyze clim column and put in fx and get a nice histogram of the distribution of the wind speed values in Potsdam in the last year and a half. Now we're going to use sapply to loop over columns and or values. There are two ways to do that. So for a data frame, we can loop over the columns. We can use the sapply function and say, well, for this data frame, run a certain function for each column. So for example, the class will give us that station's ID is an integer, mass datum is a date, and so on and so forth. Now, if we want to loop over the vector of values, we can still use sapply, and we give it a vector of values, not a data frame, but a vector of values. And then we can have our own custom little function that kind of looks very similar to what we saw on the previous slide, but now it doesn't get saved into an object with a name, so it's called an anonymous function, but it will work just as well. And for this particular example, we're doing the same thing. We're still taking the name of that data frame and getting the class of that. And then we will see that that gives us the same results. Right, with that in mind, you should be all set to run a full little data analysis project, including visualization. Go ahead and have fun with this exercise. Pause the video for as long as you need, and then I'll show what I did for this now. Right, so I have a pretty dense script here. Let's go jump through this. So you can see I have an empty environment, and you can get that with Ctrl-Shift-F10 to restart R if you have changed your settings, as I suggested on the earlier slide, particularly in the global options. Say do not restore it at startup and do not save it when you're closing. Then you can with Ctrl-Shift-F10 or on Mac Command 0 or Command Shift 0, get a completely clean R session with no objects, and so you can test, does everything actually run in my script. So let's go line by line, and I'm gonna explicitly skip this line for now. I'm going to define my function. That works, no errors. And I can test my function and see, all right, this works mostly, but I do not get a title. And so that's why it's important to go in order of things. And so if I had not missed this thing, it would have worked. So what I can do, obviously send this whole thing, and then I do get that, and I can test this, Command-Shift-D to duplicate the line, and then we can do our trusty FX for wind speed or maximum wind speed again, and so that all works. So now we can open a PDF over all the par values, or run for all these par values the function analyze clim column, put the output into ranges and simplify the out list to a vector if possible, or a matrix. It will create the object. We can close the PDF device. We can look at it through the files, and we can see that this works for all the individual columns. And now we can look at these ranges and have one matrix, which is kind of like a data frame as in tabular data, but it's all one data type, in this case numbers. And so that's some pretty neat code. Now, this could do with a few comments here and there, things like test the function so that we know what we did there. Analyze clim column is a pretty good function name. Analysis. Maybe we would want a comment here, read data. I tend to have like a colon so that I know, okay, what is gonna happen in the next bit, but that's absolutely a matter of taste. And then run for all columns or something like that. All right, and the function approach is very nice. R is a functional programming language, so this is all very short and elegant code, and we get nice objects out of that, so this is pretty good. Now, there is obviously a lot more to R and tips and tricks in RStudio as well. I suggest to take one of my bigger classes in German or English if you like, and I have Python material too. But before we wrap up this course, I want to give you a little bit of hints for further help and ask for feedback. So a couple of resources that should be very helpful. Hadley Wickham has R4 Data Science, which is an online book, so that's wonderful. If you want a German book, Uwe Lüges is still kind of like the nicest that I'm aware of. There may be plenty of other books, obviously, too. As I said, I have courses available that you can have a look at. If you want to print something, print a reference card. This is one that I very much like, but there are other ones too. And if you have programming questions, post them on the Stack Overflow website. That's kind of your main resource. But if you just Google them, you'll usually get directed to that too. Right. If you could take a moment to fill out the feedback form, that would be wonderful. This helps improve the course for the next iteration. Thanks very much for being here, and I hope you learned something. Go ahead and write some comments to the video if you like, and reach out to me if you need help. Have a good time, and I hope you get to do some wonderful stuff with coding.